All right, good morning, everybody. So glad to be here with you. My name is Judi Gatson. I'm an anchor with WIS Television. Thrilled to be able to moderate our discussions today on issues that are really important to South Carolina. We're going to start this first forum by having just very brief introductions. I assume that not a whole lot of depth is needed to know in terms of the background, and I know that they provided some links and additional information. But just so that we set the table and know who we're hearing from, their subject matter of expertise, and then we'll dive into a few questions. If you all have questions as well, we're happy to incorporate those into the conversation. So let's go ahead and get started. We have Amanda Richardson, Vice President for Apprenticeship Carolina with us. Taryn Shekitka, did I get that right, Taryn? Close enough. Shekitka. Shekitka, I got it, Shekitka, the kit, got it. Taryn Shekitka, got it now, with South Carolina Trucking Association and Associated Industries of the South Carolina Foundation, and Bryan Grady with us from the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce. So Amanda, we'll start with you and work our way across. If you just give a brief introduction of kind of your overview of what you do, and our topic this morning, developing a durable workforce system for the future. We'll dive into that after everyone makes their introductions.
Absolutely. Good morning. Again, Amanda Richardson. I'm the Vice President for Apprenticeship Carolina. We are a division within the South Carolina Technical College system and are housed at the system office just right across the interstate. But Apprenticeship Carolina works with companies across South Carolina in all industries to help design, register, and utilize pre-apprenticeship programs and registered apprenticeship programs with the U.S. Department of Labor. We have about 20 folks on staff, and feel like, of course, apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs may be a good solution, are a good solution, may be a good solution for you in terms of workforce development.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. Bryan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Bryan Grady. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for Labor Market Information at the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce. What that means in plain English is we disseminate, produce, and analyze data on demographic, employment, and workforce issues throughout South Carolina. I also have a great deal of expertise in the housing space. For 3 years, I was the Chief Research Officer at the State Housing Authority that the chairman was speaking of earlier. I also am on the Richland County Planning Commission and on the board of South Carolina Habitat for Humanity. So this is a passion project for me, and glad to hear the discussion.
I appreciate you being here. Taryn.
Good morning, Taryn Shekitka. I'm with the South Carolina Trucking Association, which is also a part of the Associated Industries of South Carolina Foundation. We partner with the Home Builders Association, the Forestry Association, the Associated General Contractors, and the Chamber of Commerce on our specific workforce development project, Be Pro, Be Proud, where we are looking to develop pride, progress, and professionalism to build the next generation of skilled trades workforce in South Carolina.
All right, wonderful. Taryn, thank you so much. In preparing for the panel this morning, ran across a question that I thought was a really great place to start, and it relates to workforce, Bryan. So we'll start with you, and ladies, if you would be so kind as to weigh in as well. It says, I believe that a house is where a job goes to sleep. And what they meant by that was, I believe that that's a great starting point for the discussion. As our economic engine continues to grow, do we as a state have the necessary workforce to grow, and does this workforce have places to quote unquote sleep, which is such an important question. Bryan?
Sure, thank you. So there are definitely some challenges. I mean, I think I'm speaking to an audience of people in the business community. It's not shocking that there's been challenges finding the workers necessary to sustain and grow businesses in South Carolina. And that's not unique to us. That's a national phenomenon. One of the things that I've been involved with at DO is we had a South Carolina labor force participation task force, essentially the question of where are the workers, right? The somewhat dispiriting answer is they got older. Essentially, you had a situation where South Carolina, because of the aging of the native population, as well as people who migrate here and tend to be at or near retirement age, the state has aged substantially. So when you combine sort of the outflow of the baby boom generation and the inflow of what is a smaller generation, there's challenges there. So we as a state need to work on the question, and we are working on the question of how do we make sure that all of these businesses that are coming to our state, that are being attracted here, that are looking to grow here, as well as all the people who are locating here. South Carolina has the fastest population growth rate in the country right now. That we have a balance there. In terms of how where the housing stock is. We heard about 2008, right? And we all know what that did to us and what that did to this industry in particular. For the 10 years after 2008, we built in this country and in South Carolina at a Great Depression level, when obviously the economy was much worse and the country was much smaller. And the other factor here is that the most common household size in South Carolina and the country as a whole is 1. So we need to think about how are we going to house a population that is very different from the sort of nuclear family population that we have in the back of our head from the 20th century. And a lot of the question there is a matter of zoning and land use policy. We have local governments in South Carolina that have very stringent requirements on what you are allowed to build. And in many cases, that is housing that does not fit the realities of the 21st century workforce in South Carolina. So if we're going to make sure that we have the necessary housing supply to meet the workforce needs and to have those people live in proximity to where the jobs are located, because if you look at where housing is being built in South Carolina, it's largely not near employment centers. That's going to take deregulation of zoning and land use statutes, county by county, city by city, town by town throughout South Carolina. And that's a daunting challenge, but it's a challenge that's necessary if we're going to meet the demands of the 21st century economy.
It really lays out some of the questions we should be asking lawmakers, especially in an election year, as you're looking at issues that are really important to you in your industries. So, Taryn, when you look at it from the trucking perspective, what do you think in the 21st century workforce, what are some of the biggest challenges in moving forward in growing that workforce?
I can say that construction, trucking, skilled trades, healthcare, et cetera, are all looking at a massive shortfall for what's needed down the road. Doing the research for this, looking at the aging of the population, they said in 2020, well, in 1970, our average age was 24 for the workforce. Now it's 40. And in the 31, they're estimating 42. So that aging population is concerning. The number of children coming through, births are decreasing. Our population for workforce is challenged. From a trucking perspective, enticing individuals to get behind the wheel of a truck is more daunting than it used to be. We used to be the knights of the roadway. It used to be a very individualistic thing. We're a highly regulated industry now. Insurance is a major challenge. So we have challenges working from high school into a behind-the-wheel job. Our 18 to 21-year-olds are prohibited from going outside of state lines or hauling freight that travels through or outside of the state. That too is a policy issue and an insurance issue that we are constantly facing. We've been fighting tort reform diligently, and we will continue to fight to make those progresses.
And so as we look at this issue from the perspective, Amanda, of apprenticeship, there's just that creates a great bridge to the workforce. What are some of the key strategies that you think apprenticeship can be involved in terms of helping to build the workforce for the 21st century?
Absolutely. So workforce is certainly an issue, and we work with a lot of companies that are looking to come into the state or companies that are already here looking to expand. Our colleges work with them, and we work with them from an apprenticeship standpoint. And with that, we tend to shift our focus a little bit into a few key areas, and one is upskilling your existing workforce. So you have individuals, maybe they just need some additional skills to meet your needs. So we can look at doing that. Apprenticeships can be used for brand new employees coming into the company or to upskill existing employees, and we see a mix of both. The second is looking at your basic entry-level skills. There are individuals out working, but maybe they're working in a different industry and they're wanting to get into your industry, but they don't have any experience specific to that industry. So getting those individuals who may be looking to switch careers. And then thirdly, looking at youth. So youth apprenticeships are huge, where we partner with the local career and technology center. A lot of them have building construction programs. So seeing how companies can tap into that population before they really make a decision on a career choice or a college choice.
So following up on that youth aspect and component, what strategies are you using or already in play to help kind of feed that pipeline and make sure that, because a lot of students, even doing stories about, college preparation and all of that, don't know that that avenue is available. So what are you all doing to, increase access and visibility, I guess?
And that's the key, and I see it with my own children and my own son as he's navigating this landscape, trying to figure out what he wants to do. And for me, it's all about making sure they're aware of the opportunities that are available to them. So once an apprenticeship program is established, the apprenticeship program is owned and managed, if you will, by the employer. So making sure the employer is out marketing that program to the local career and technology center, having direct access to those students in that classroom to let them know about their company, to let them know about the program and those opportunities that are available to them.
Yeah, tremendous resource. Taryn, I want to come back to you because this next question has to do with what the South Carolina workforce will look like in 15 to 20 years, and you kind of touched on the aging population. What insight can you share with us about, looking down the road, what the workforce is going to look like and what challenges that's going to present for our workforce here in South Carolina?
So, from Be Pro, Be Proud's perspective, we're looking to change the path at which our workforce is going. Partnering with the Apprenticeship Carolina, our career and technology education centers, our high schools, we're trying to really, I think the mindset nowadays is that everybody wants to be a TikTok or a YouTuber. And so we're trying to change that attitude and also change the attitude of our growing, upcoming, incoming workforce, and change the mindset from a four-year degree to a trade education, that a lot of those can be achieved at the high school level or at our technical colleges with much less debt. So changing the mindset of how our upcoming youth are going to look at jobs is really critical.
Any idea how we can do that? Because you're right, everybody wants to be a content creator these days, so.
Well, I want to share a little story about what happened this weekend at our truck driving championships, because I think this was really relatable. Okay. We had 3 students from Hayward Career and Technology Education Center here in Richland 1 come join us and compete alongside 85 other truck drivers. Those truck drivers, a lot of them have been doing this for a long time. They are the baby boomers who are going to be exiting the workforce. And they got to spend the whole day with these drivers, learning what it's like to be behind the wheel, what it's like to grow in a career, and watching them take in that education and those mentor relationships that they were exposed to, I think is really important and something that we need to focus on going forward, is showing them that there's a path forward. It may not be you're going to be successful in making $100,000 right out the gate, but there are building blocks and stepping stones if you're willing to put in the work and play the long game.
Yeah.
I think that's critical.
All right, good, great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Bryan, obviously it's a subject matter rather of expertise for you, the South Carolina workforce, what it will look like in the next 15 to 20 years, and in your mind, what industries we need to be focused and concentrating on.
Sure. So Sure. So I think there's a number of questions there. So certainly what we do at the Department of Employment and Workforce is respond to the work being done by the Department of Commerce and other entities in state government that are attracting business to South Carolina. So certainly when you look at initiatives that the governor has spoken of, there's an interest in the electric vehicle industry. And we saw that with Scout coming to Richland County. We've seen that with battery plant and recycling facilities coming to Florence and Berkeley counties. So that's certainly an area where there's a lot of interest. So my team and others that do put together a study last year, and we looked at what occupations are most needed for that. And there's a number, software engineers and developers and logisticians and jobs like that certainly come to mind. Those are going to be the kinds of things that, as we see more tech in everything, and we all learned in 2020 how important the supply chain is. Those are a couple of occupations that jumped out. There's going to be an overall supply gap analysis that will be coming out in the next, hopefully, next 2 or 3 months. That's being produced by my research staff, and what that will speak to is what are the occupations where the people coming out of colleges and universities throughout South Carolina are not matching the needs of the workforce as articulated by businesses today, let alone 15 to 20 years from now, in terms of what sorts of jobs they're hiring for. So I don't think it will surprise any of you that there are not enough people coming out of colleges and universities to meet all the jobs of tomorrow. That's just not there. So basically your solutions are either poached from the existing workforce, which then causes challenges for the existing corporations out there, or you are bringing people in from elsewhere, from out of state, to fill these positions. So those are, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So if we look at where we're headed here, for the first time we really are thinking about workforce in that sort of 15 to 20 year time horizon. There's the, last year, the legislature passed and the governor signed the Statewide Education and Workforce Development Act, which is typically called Act 67 at DO. And essentially what that is all about is building a unified state plan for workforce development, bringing in research and data to inform what we should be doing as a state to make sure that we do have the workforce we need. I just spoke about the supply gap analysis. We'll also be doing return on investment analysis so that job seekers essentially know if they get a career in X or get Y degree, what that's going to mean for their lifetime earnings. So providing that information is really going to help people get a sense of what options are out there for them, right? So the only other thing I want to say is, this sort of thing needs to be jumped on right now. How do we get that workforce of the future? And we have Apprenticeship Carolina up here. Certainly, apprenticeships are part of that puzzle. I would say you got to go younger than that. And the Be Pro Be Proud program that was spoken of certainly does that, but. Getting in touch with the K-12 school districts in the areas where you work. At DO, we have regional workforce advisors. That's their whole thing, is how do you connect the business community with the education community. So I would say that's the place to start. If you're talking 15 to 20 years, you're talking about the people in preschool and kindergarten, right? So you've got to get in there and sort of break that stigma that was spoken of earlier, that if you're talking about a white-collar household, they might have some very outdated ideas about what it means to be in the construction industry, right? And so we've got to get out there and tell them, no, this is a job where you can actually make a lot of money, and here's the data that backs that up. So I think that's, those are some of the challenges that we're looking at.
You were saying amen to that, I hear over here, Taryn.
I was, because, when from the Be Pro Be Proud perspective, we have a host of trades that are listed, and the median incomes for that are 40s to 65. So there are plenty of opportunities here for well-paying jobs that meet the needs of affordable housing. Like, you're going to be able to actually buy a house with the incomes without having the debt. And I think that's a critical part of this, is you can have a decent salary and have too much school loans and other debt. And then the percentage of your paycheck that you're bringing home, you're not going to have that 30 to 50% to put down on a mortgage every month. And so that's where people start living more week to week and paycheck to paycheck. And so getting a really good career without a lot of economic baggage is critical to afford a good home.
Absolutely.
And stability.
Absolutely. So, Amanda, as we bring in, kind of the apprenticeship angle to this question of what will the South Carolina workforce look like in 15 to 20 years, what are some things that you see in the future of your program and how businesses can leverage that?
Well, definitely now is the time to start thinking about it and building those programs. We talked a lot about the CATE centers, and I would recommend if you're not already part of your local advisory board at your CATE center that has a building construction program, definitely consider that connection. It's a great connection to have to be directly tied to those students. One of the beauties of apprenticeship is there's over 1,100 occupations that can be registered as an apprenticeship. So it cuts across all industries, and a lot of the occupations that you're needing or looking for can be apprenticed. So.
Do you feel like a lot of companies are taking advantage of that?
Some are, but we have about 900 employer sponsors across the state now, so there are a lot of opportunities left.
And for those who are interested in it, what's the best way to kind of pursue that plan and to find more about it, to incorporate it into their strategic plan for building the workforce?
Yeah, we have apprenticeship consultants across the state. They are regionally based, and if you're interested, reach out to us. I do have some flyers with their contact information to connect with them so that they can work with you, listen to your needs, and see if an apprenticeship would be a good fit for you. And if so, they can start helping you to design and develop what that would look like to meet your specific needs.
Yeah, and kind of make sure that we're matching the time, because as Bryan mentioned earlier, the ways so many jobs have changed just based on technology and the way that people approach different jobs and even the mindset that people have about different jobs. We're gonna, if you all have any questions, I certainly want to work them in, but Bryan, I want to come back to you to talk about areas of the state where you think we need to focus when we look ahead to the future. We hear so much, particularly when it comes to education, about getting business investment in rural areas to help with those schools and jobs and how it all ties together into housing. But what areas do you think we need to specifically be focused on right now?
Well, I think there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So the chairman's opening remarks, sort of spoke to the broad challenge of the population growth is concentrated in a very limited portion of the state. You're dealing with an environment. This is not news, but over the past quarter century, you've seen concentration in the city's major metropolitan areas of population, and you've seen the rural counties beyond as things like mills and factories close. Those communities have in many cases become depopulated and economically distressed. So certainly at DO, that's something that's on our radar. So I mentioned Act 67 earlier. The legislature appropriated funding for us to have a rural initiatives team. So we have people who are dedicated to hiring events, job fairs, job seeker services, explicitly for people in the Tier 3 and Tier 4 counties as defined by the Department of Commerce. Those are the areas that have higher unemployment rates, lower income levels. So certainly that's a population that we want to serve and want to make sure that our state's rural communities are as robust as they can be. But again, if you're talking about workforce, that's up to businesses and where they locate, and they are making very clear where they want to locate. And so there's got to be a thought given to how do we build large amounts of housing, in many cases dense housing, in proximity to those locations. How do we make sure that there are as few barriers as possible? Because when we surveyed people who dropped out of the labor force, in many cases transportation along with childcare were two of the major issues. And again, those are issues that the legislature has directed DO and other agencies in state government to work to address. So we need to think about this stuff holistically. We can't think about workforce as one silo and housing as another silo and transportation as another silo. Those three things are intimately connected to each other. And if we don't think through how those three things fit together as a state, other states are going to eat our lunch. So that's what I think we have to work on.
Taryn, how are we comparing with other states, in terms of your industry and attracting new workers to the industry and to the workforce?
I think we're on par with every other state at this moment because
Really?
we're all facing the same challenges. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't say that we're doing any better than any other state. I will say that in my discussions with our national organization, we are being more proactive than most of our sister states. We have been working diligently for probably 7 or 8 years with the high school level and up. We even have been going out to middle schools. We spend a lot of time trying to partner our companies with the high schools. There are 9 diesel tech programs at high school levels across South Carolina. There are 3 CDL programs. But as part of that, I've learned a lot about all of the industries and about the thought processes of our high school CTE programs. And they're really trying to be proactive and responsive to the incoming businesses. Aerospace has really launched itself in South Carolina. When that rumor started, the high schools started looking at where they could start plugging in aerospace. Manufacturing, of course, is always huge in South Carolina. Cybersecurity is becoming a big thing, and that's stuff that the high school programs are looking at and forming programs, and they're also looking for business partners. I think something that businesses tend to miss out on is this wonderful opportunity to get plugged into their local high school programs and create and cultivate the relationships with not just the schools, but with the students, so that you can partner then with the Apprenticeship Carolina program and start a youth apprenticeship. That youth apprenticeship can then segue into an adult apprenticeship post-graduation, and those are tax credits for you as businesses. They're opportunities to establish goodwill and relationships with students who will not just be there for 3 to 6 months, but hopefully a career. So I can't say enough about the need for collaborative organization, like collaborative workforce development that's really localized.
With the programs that you all have instituted and implemented already with the schools, are those concentrated in particular areas? Are they mostly in rural school districts? Are they more in city centers? And are the schools receptive to this, or is there more work to be done to build those partnerships where you can create the pathways to create more of those programs?
So I'm going to say are the schools receptive to the partnerships? They are begging for them.
Okay.
They need them. They need them for volunteer instructors, hands-on tours, and exploration for their children. They need it for tangible goods. So there's a lot of needs in the high schools. When it comes to the demographics of where these are located, our diesel tech programs at the high school level, there's one in the upstate, so in Spartanburg. There's one right here in Columbia. There's one in Dorchester. There's one in Charleston. And I have a map if anybody wants it. And then the 3 high school CDL programs. One is at Cope Area Career Center, which is really small and 45 minutes from Orangeburg. But
Okay.
they've done a great job with this tiny program that started off with 3 graduates. We partnered them with OC Tech so that they can get the behind the wheel. And then out of that first class, 1 went into the military and 1 went into a truck driving job with a local farm, and he is doing magnificently. And then the most recent class that's about to graduate, the same company is about to hire the first female out of that program.
That is outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, and that seems that would help also address, or at least contribute to shifting the mindset some, to be able to have that hands-on experience through the schools at that level, which also involves, presumably parental involvement to say, hey, wait a minute, this might not be what I thought.
Right. I mean, that's one of the whole premises behind Be Pro, Be Proud
Yeah.
is shifting that mindset. It's a challenge and a hurdle. I know when I was brought up, it was, you're going to get a 4-year degree. I've been telling my kids, you're going to go to Midlands Tech and you're going to get your associates, and that's going to be the first thing. And if you decide to go for the other 2 years and get your 4-year degree, then you can. The other 2 schools, by the way, for
Yes.
CDL are at Dorchester Career Center, which is, the Charleston area, and here in Richland County.
Okay, I was wondering how the demographic look across the state. That's
Yeah.
great to know. Thank you so much. And you gave me the perfect segue speaking about Midlands Technical College, because our technical college system is such an important driver for our state workforce. So Amanda, coming back to you, what I guess do you think are the biggest opportunities as we see where our workforce is moving and growing for the technical college system to really help us to get out front?
Sure. Well, one of the beauties of the technical college system is that it can be responsive to the needs of the industry, particularly on the non-credit or continuing education side of the house, where your shorter term industry recognized credentials, certificates are housed, because they can cater and tailor a program specific to the needs of the company that also feed right into the academic programs that the colleges offer. So.
Bryan, what about you? Any insights regarding our technical college system and how critical it is in terms of growing our workforce?
Oh, I can't say enough. I mean, Governor McMaster is always out there talking about how important the technical college system is and how it is an envy of the nation, quite frankly. So we certainly have a close working relationship. There's a coordinating council for workforce development, and DO and the tech system are 2 of the key cogs in that process. So, many of the jobs, as mentioned, they don't require a 4-year degree, and somebody can have a very successful career with them. So we are constantly partnering in many ways to supply the workforce of tomorrow.
What are the biggest things that you are seeing in terms of, you mentioned Scout earlier, and obviously electric vehicles. We've seen a lot of people from the administration, the governor's talked a lot about it, but what are the things that companies are looking for in terms of making a decision about whether to invest in South Carolina in terms of bringing their new workforce? I mean, and I know the effort to try and get more companies in rural areas is a little different than, say, a Scout coming to Blythewood. But what are some of the key factors that they're looking at, the key drivers that are attracting those companies or driving them away?
Well, so I mean, I would say that it's a mixed bag, but it's mostly a positive one. So when you look at why businesses locate in South Carolina, the fact is, this is where people want to live. Like I said, you've got migration that is driving people from other parts of the country to South Carolina, myself included a few years back. So there's a lot to like. Certainly the state of South Carolina prides itself on having a light touch when it comes to regulation and making sure that businesses are comfortable here. And my agency is part of that. We are, it's kind of a hard sell, because when we say we're from the government and we're here to help, people don't really believe us, but we really are. So I think there's that. Certainly there have been challenges that have been identified, particularly here in the Midlands, about commercial and industrial tax rates as a drag that is potentially why the Midlands is not keeping pace with the Low Country and the upstate region. But, the fact is we're doing a very good job attracting people. Certainly part of that is the incentives, but I would argue, no business is going to take a tax break to set up shop in a place where they're not going to succeed. I mean, that's nobody's going to do that. So we do have a population that has skills and meets the needs of particularly manufacturers, but a lot of different kinds of companies. And certainly a lot of the work coming out of the Department of Commerce this year has been about how do we broaden that success that we've had with attracting entities like Scout to bring in a more diverse set of businesses and therefore build a workforce that matches that.
Outstanding. Any questions from our audience before we move on? We still got a little time during this session.
Oh, there are plenty back here.
All right, sir. Well, stand up, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Curtis Askew, and I've worked with workforce development. I've familiar with that Apprenticeship, LMI data. The questions that I have really that none of you have touched on. In 2014, we moved from a system of GED to where we went to HSEC. And I know about that really well because I was the one who pushed the state legislatures so that we had an alternative to the GED. We still have individuals in this state who do not have a meaningful pathway forward. Can you speak about that? And after you speak about that, can you touch on how you push data back into the public domain, particularly down to the local level, such that it is timely? I've used your data from Duke. It is, some of it proprietary. I've gotten a few calls about secondary analysis. So that makes it very difficult for local entities, and I work with a lot of nonprofits, to engage in the sort of work that keeps our workforce moving. So could you touch on that a little bit?
Fine.
Well, I'll start with the back half of that. So I mentioned a little bit about what my actual job is at the Labor Market Information Division. And we do have a lot of resources, and we're in the process of building a lot more resources, whether that's things we're working on internally or things that are related to Act 67. Certainly, if you're talking about what is happening right now in the workforce, there are not a lot of tools available to really get a handle on that. A lot of the data comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the U.S. Census Bureau, and those have a lag of, depending on the data set, months to years. We have the monthly employment situation report, which is a very top level kind of document. We just put it out on Friday for the month of March, and that gives you, unemployment rates by county and some very general information about what's happening with the path of the economy. One of the things in Act 67 is a mandate to better use what's called real-time labor market information. And what that means in English is job posting data. So we do work with, as you said, a proprietary contractor called JobsEQ that provides detailed data on what's happening with job postings, broken out by industry, by occupation, by location. Slice and dice the data however you like. It's basically scraping a bunch of websites, so it's got little web crawlers that go to Indeed, they go to Monster, they go to all those places, and they vacuum up all that information and they clean it and they provide that to us in bulk. We definitely want to figure out how do we do a better job conveying that information, making it more accessible. How do we produce new products with that data? How do we get that in the hands of the business community, of job seekers, of all these different stakeholders? This is not something I'm going to be able to snap my fingers and it'll appear tomorrow, but it is something that in the next year or two we are going to be working on, and I would certainly welcome a longer conversation with you personally to figure out what would be most useful to figure out how to do that. So.
What would you say the biggest challenges are in terms of moving forward with that right now?
Well, I would say that the legislature certainly gave us some resources to meet the mandates in this act, but it's certainly not a massive operation that we have it do. But we're in the process of preparing to procure a statewide education and workforce development portal. That is designed to be a one-stop shop. The idea is that anybody who wants to know anything about workforce in South Carolina, that is going to be the place to go. We're not gonna say, well, no, you got to talk to agency X because they're the ones who do such and such. No, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do a no wrong door, one-stop shop solution. That's going to take a little while. To build that out, to build the partnerships with other state agencies, with the private sector, with industry. But we're working on it, and I'm meeting regularly with entities like the Hospitality Association, the Hospital Association, that are coming to us and saying, we've got these workforce challenges, please help us figure out what to do with them. So I welcome the conversation with everybody in this room about what are the solutions, but rest assured, the legislature and the governor have heard the concerns of the business community on this issue. They responded with this legislation, and now it's up to state government to implement it, and that's job one every day for me.
And the GED question, I want to make sure we address that as well.
How are we responding to the fact that we had a piece of legislation that provided 2 pathways for individuals to get a high school equivalency degree? We are now back to 1. And that means that individuals who started the GED, didn't complete it, had to start all over again in 2014. It's a situation that other states face dealing with a private enterprise company. And now, because we built this into our legislation, we have a bottleneck that started in 2014 and it is dragged on here up until 2023, 24.
So I'll be honest, this is a little outside my depth. Certainly at DO, thanks to legislation, we've been able to provide cash incentives to try to help people complete their GED. I would say that's a conversation that we would need to get the adult education folks from the Department of Education in the room to speak to. And I'm happy to connect you and make that happen. But certainly, one of the things this coordinating council is all about is doing a wide-ranging survey of the landscape and trying to figure out what you're pointing out of these little hitches in the system that are derailing people. Because the fact is, whereas 50 years ago, there was a lot of labor supply and we didn't have to worry about all this stuff so much, now we do. We got to figure out, all right, for every individual person who falls out of the education or training or military path or whatever they want to do, how do we get them back on it, and how do we make sure that we connect that person with the workforce opportunities that South Carolina is bringing?
Fantastic. Another question from the audience? Thank you so much. Yes, sir. Your name and representative company?
My name is Todd Latiff. I spoke previously. My wife is, works for Pickens County, is a special education director there. But the challenge, and I applaud y'all for going down to middle schools and high schools and educating the students. I mean, that's the key. But one part that I didn't hear very much about is the parents. And to me, that's even a bigger challenge because of the stigma associated with learning a trade. And we're doing a better job in educating teachers and getting to these students and saying, hey, a 4-year degree might be in your future, it might not be. However, here's an alternative. But when they get home, their parents are saying, no, you're not going to Tri-County Tech, Water Midlands Tech for half your day to learn a trade. You're going to stay in school and finish your 4-year degree and have a chance to go to college. So that, to me, is even a more significant challenge than educating our teachers and students about the opportunities in front. What are we doing to address that?
Taryn, any thoughts on that front?
We too are challenged.
Yeah.
So my associate, Suzanne, who is really out in front of the students more with the Be Pro, Be Proud initiative, she and I have done a lot of discussions about how we get to the parents and how we target them. Since we cannot access mailing lists of high school students' personal home addresses and send a letter to the parents, it becomes more challenging. It becomes more of a marketing strategy. I know driving around the state, there are certain companies who are starting to either post younger workforce, younger staff on the billboards so that face becomes younger and more recognizable to parents as that could be my kid. If you look at television commercials, a lot of multi-generation families in HVAC and plumbing, et cetera, are starting to use their children as marketing. I think that is one way to start influencing parental opinion. I think if there's some way that we can work with the Department of Education to have a more direct line with parents, that would be beneficial to all of us. There are a lot of community activities that even if we're not there, with the double expandable, hands-on, virtual reality, amazing piece of equipment that we have, your companies can be out there talking about what kind of job opportunities and the benefits associated with them that you have. But I will take suggestions.
And what about seminars?
So happy to put that on the list and to welcome the parents maybe for a precursor seminar. Here's what your kids are going to be learning. We do send out communications in advance for Be Pro, Be Proud locations to those locations and to those schools so that the kids are getting a little bit of an intro to Be Pro, Be Proud before they actually tour the workshop. But we could do better, and I'll take that suggestion back. No problem.
Thank you for the question, Todd. We appreciate it. With the programs that you all have in place, is there any connection with parents through those programs?
Yes, because
Okay.
each one of the stations on board our workshop is sponsored by by industry. So we
Okay.
have companies that have relationships, Sheely Truck Centers, Nephron, Diesel Laptops. There are plenty of partners with our Be Pro, Be Proud specifically that we could do a better job of getting them in front of the parents.
Okay, great idea. Thank you again, Todd. Did you want to weigh in, Amanda?
I was just going to mention, that's a great point, because even if the kid is 100% sold, or the student, if the parent isn't, that's a stopping point. They're just not going to allow the student or try to tell them why they shouldn't. It's like Taryn, it was a challenge that I saw coming up through school. My parents didn't go to college. So when I was coming up, because I was an AB student, that was my path. I wasn't shown all the other options and opportunities. And so I think making sure that we schedule, and we try to do this as well, but making sure that we schedule events at times where parents are able to come and to learn about these programs and opportunities. And it's typically an easier selling point with an apprenticeship program when you're thinking about youth apprenticeship, because these students are becoming employed for the company. But not only are they becoming employed, they are seeing a career path. They are seeing on-the-job training. They are seeing job-related education, and they are seeing a scalable wage progression to show how their pay is going to increase as their skill set increases. So they're seeing a company that has already invested time to lay this map out for their student and to show them a trajectory rather than just getting them into a job and then not knowing. And in a lot of cases, if there are, say, degree or diploma programs built into the apprenticeship program, what scholarship and grant funding doesn't cover, in most cases, that employer is willing to cover. So not only are these individuals getting that on-the-job experience, they are earning a paycheck, but they're also getting their education at no cost to the student or the parent, and the parents really like that. So.
Did you want to weigh in as well, Bryan?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, I think absolutely that is something that is top of mind for us. That is something that has come up in these meetings of the Coordinating Council for Workforce Development and others that I've been involved in. So the question is, how do we do that? And there's only so many things a state agency is going to be able to do about that, right? I mean, we can put out reports, we can do all this stuff, but you can't lead a horse to water, right? So the question is, how do we make that work? So we're going to be putting out a lot of information in the next several months and several years about useful information for parents about what, if your child goes into X versus Y versus Z, what is that going to mean for their lifetime earnings? What is that going to mean for all these other factors? What are the high value credentials that are most associated with good jobs? The return on investment analysis, the supply gap analysis, all these other things that are in development that are going to be on this workforce portal. Certainly would appreciate, let's say, the words of trusted television personalities and others to make sure that these reports that we get out are publicized and that people have an awareness of them, because we have a great marketing team. They are small but mighty. But this has got to be a full court press of how do we figure out how to get these issues in conversation, and how do we make sure that those are informed conversations based on what we're seeing in South Carolina today. So.
We pass them out to the students.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the regional workforce advisors earlier. I mean, that is what they're there to do. They speak at assemblies, they get out in the community. So we're going to figure out how do we arm those people with the information to have those conversations with parents, counselors, and the students themselves.
Well, and Todd, your question makes me also think about just the state of education right now and how many teachers we're losing, because your same issue that you raise about trying to reach to parents, or this is the same frustration that a lot of teachers have about having parental involvement and being able to make those connections. And now with us losing so many teachers, and you talk about, the shortage in the workforce, that's another issue we're going to have to be able to figure out how to address to get qualified teachers, good teachers in there who can create those pathways and those connections with the students, with the parents, with the families. And I don't know if anybody wants to weigh in on just the important role of education. I mean, just how it helps to build a foundation for everything that we're talking about here for the workforce, and how critical or how crippling it can be if we don't find a way to overcome this teacher shortage that we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in many cases, the teacher or the instructor is that student's connection to opportunities.
Right. So that's another challenge that we're going to have to really get serious about confronting. We have about 15 minutes left in this session. Do we have any more questions from the audience? You guys are having some great insight. I appreciate it. Your name?
Yes, Haley Evans. I'm an HBA member and advocate. I own a marketing agency, and I'm also passionate about education. I understand the apprenticeship part. I'm curious if there's any kind of entrepreneurship taught, or that seed planted with those students or the youth, for those who could go on to create more jobs, that kind of thing. So just curious if that's an opportunity there.
I think that goes back to the high school programs that are available. There are so many that are not well known beyond the walls of the school. And there are ways in which the schools are promoting and making a big splash with what their students are able to achieve. So there are schools that do signing days for apprenticeships. There are schools that do internships. There are job fairs that are strictly geared towards children. They're doing, I think, what they think they can do to reach out to the public. I do think that this goes a little into your field too. We need more coverage of all the positives that are happening so that those can snowball. So if you have some free PR assistance for some of these schools, they might take you up on it.
Well, and I enjoy the workshops and helping students that, they don't have a business background, or maybe their parents don't. They don't have that financial, wisdom. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoy teaching on leadership, marketing, sales, operations, how to develop a business and give them, at least plant the seed if they're interested in something like that, and empower them to go on to do that eventually.
The high school systems really took note of what the businesses on their advisory committees were saying several years ago when this change in job versus TikTok happened, and how to really deal with students and their soft skills, interviewing, showing up on time, dressing appropriately, personal finance, etc. That's not only at the high school level, but even the college programs, like OC Tech even added it as part of their trucking degree, because it is critical for them to understand that with every job they are their own businessman or woman. So.
And I would also, I just wonder, for example, with school career fairs, do you all participate regularly in those and take, some of the high-tech equipment out to those events? Or sometimes they're just in the gym. I don't know if if they're able to even accommodate that, but.
So yes, we've
Okay.
participated in every level of career fair over the years, from tabletops where we have job postings and an overview of the industries. And then now with the Be Pro, Be Proud, that gets scheduled a year in advance.
That's
or
great.
a semester in advance, so that they can be on site and rotating through South Carolina to the schools and community events. But we also have programs like our South Carolina Road Team, and we have truck drivers who will go out and take rigs to the schools and show them firsthand what it's like to be a truck driver. They talk about what you have to have as a base level, and then what it looks like for your future. But that's not just limited to trucking. When you go out to those events, there's also fire departments and ambulance and all of those critical skills are represented. And the students are able to talk one-on-one with people in those professions about what it looks like.
Well, and that's what I was wondering, those hands-on experiences, and particularly if they're held at times when parents are available and can participate, that might be a good connection as well.
Yeah, most of those are held during the school day.
Yeah.
And a lot of those become more centralized district-wide, and they bus students in
Gotcha.
to maximize their student population reach. The number of things that happen on weekends or after hours are more limited, but there's still opportunities for those, and invitations and participation are welcome.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what I'm thinking of are more of the community events where you do have, different, things out there for the kids to climb on and get in and see and all of those things. Not necessarily a traditional career fair, but the community festivals where they have the different first responders and people come out, that might be an avenue as well. So great question, Haley. Thank you so much. Another question from the audience? Anyone else? Well, we were talking about Midlands Technical College, or technical college components to all of this, and I was going to come to you before we had our audience question. In your mind, what are the biggest opportunities in terms of the technical college system, in terms of growing our workforce?
The lack of student loans after graduation. I think that's the biggest opportunity, and the biggest thing that is not fully communicated. I know that the technical college system, specifically I think Midlands Tech, went through some rebranding a few years ago to make the community more aware of the fact that they may be a 2-year, but they're still a college, and they are still creating pathways for good paying, solid jobs without burden.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from the audience? All right, we'll move into our final question. It's kind of a big overview for you all to address. And Amanda, we'll go ahead and start with you. What are the things that you believe we need to do to engage the workforce of tomorrow? I mean, obviously we've touched on a few of these things, but as we look at education, as we look at sustainable and affordable housing, as we look at technology and all of these things, what are the things that we need to do to sustain the workforce and build a workforce of tomorrow?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really seeing with workforce today and our younger generations is the desire for stackable credentials, the desire for pathways. We're finding that a lot of employees don't like feeling stuck in one particular role for any length of time. So being able to lay out a plan and show them that plan, I think it's something that we definitely need to consider as a way to develop their career and show them how they're not going to be doing the same job for the next 20, 30, 40 years like maybe our parents did. And I think that is very appealing to the workforce of today and tomorrow. So to be able to show them those incremental goals and milestones that can be attained in a relatively short period of time to keep them energized.
Very good, very good. Taryn, we'll pop over to you.
I think that we need to really focus on exposure to industries. mentorships, hands-on experiences, and to second what you're saying, promoting like the long game.
And Bryan?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. So obviously we've talked a lot about how do we dive deeper into the pipeline, because my boss, Director Floyd, and a bunch of other people, we have to think about the education system as a career pipeline, basically from the drop. And there's certainly been things that we've done as a state that try to speak to that. The fact that there's a requirement that everybody has to have an individual graduation plan, and that is supposed to prepare you for a career, but I think that's something that we need to think through more thoroughly of how do we make sure that the K-12 curriculum is actually driving toward the skills that are needed in the workforce and not just what we've kind of always taught historically. I mentioned the regional workforce advisors. There's a bunch of other ways that the business community can get more involved with the K-12 system and help make sure that we're meeting. Honestly, there's already federal rules on this stuff. It's just a matter of how do we do a better job of making sure that we're preparing people for the workforce, that we are building those pipelines. The other thing I would say is talk to me and my team. The Labor Market Information Shop, I tell people, we're the research team you're already paying for because you're paying your taxes. So we're out here to be a resource to the business community and everybody else who has a stake in making South Carolina a more prosperous place. So I'll just do a quick plug, LMI customer service at dew.sc.gov. I can repeat that later if you need me to. That's our inbox. That's how you get in touch with us. And certainly, the more of you who speak to a need for a specific product or information or data, that's something we can provide. And then I mentioned earlier, from the housing side, there really does have to be a conversation with local government of, like I said, I'm on a planning commission. I've seen what happens at meetings like that. What happens is people who are up there behind the table will do what the loudest, angriest people in the room want them to do. And what do those people want? Oftentimes, they want to make sure there's no housing built anywhere. And so there's got to be a counter narrative there of what makes a place great is not what you are prohibited from building there. That there's got to be this counter narrative of communities are evolving entities, and we need to have government policies that reflect that. So I would say that's another thing from the standpoint of making sure that we have the housing necessary to sustain our workforce and our economic growth in the future.
That's great. Before we wrap up, I do want to have each of you share your contact information so that if people want to connect with you and follow up on the questions that they've asked, they have an easy opportunity and connection to be able to do that. But you made me think of one other question. In this day and age of technology and the TikTok generation, how are you, and if so, how are you using social media to connect with the workforce or potential workforce in our state?
We push stuff on social media all the time. So everything that gets posted on Facebook also gets posted on LinkedIn, and we're trying to branch out to the younger, like TikTokers.
Are y'all on TikTok and all of that?
No.
Not yet, okay. IG?
None of us are cool like that.
Okay, well, that's what I want, because that's where they are. Instagram yet, or okay.
We have talked about actually getting an intern who would do specifically that, or even the possibility of doing a competition to have students be our representatives and manage their own Instagram and TikTok accounts like on our behalf. And I mean, years ago we talked about that with DPS. We've talked about it with Be Pro, Be Proud. I think that we probably should go forth and conquer that.
Well, it just occurred to me as we're talking about connecting with parents and with students and all that, they don't read letters that come home and check email, but they will be on TikTok and on Facebook. So have you all implemented social media to help advance your mission and causes with the workforce?
Absolutely. So we have a division of communications within the South Carolina Technical College System office. And Apprenticeship Carolina is, I think, on all the social media outlets, and we will promote companies who register apprenticeship programs and the
That's great.
occupations that they've registered. We also have a new tool that's available. It's called Apprenticeship Explorer, and it is an opportunity board for companies who are looking to hire apprentices into their organization. So they can post them there, and that's a centralized resource that we refer potential apprentices to, because we receive emails and calls daily from folks across the state who are looking to get into an apprenticeship program. And unfortunately, the opportunities are still fairly limited based on where they're located and what they're interested in going into. But we continue to expand those every day. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda. Bryan?
I mean, certainly it's something that we have, Department of Employment and Workforce has a social media presence. It's largely geared around building awareness of job fairs and hiring events and things of that sort. But this Coordinating Council for Workforce Development that has been reinvigorated by this recent legislation, we already have a communications committee, and so it's bringing people together from all these agencies, including the technical college system, to think through how do we promote these resources that we're going to be developing, and what are the ways that we can really make sure that it is sinking in with all these different groups. And certainly students are going to be a key part of that puzzle.
Yeah, it goes back to the first question that was asked in terms of, you have great information, but if we don't have a great way to disseminate it and to reach, the desired audiences, then we're not maximizing our capabilities. Any final questions before we wrap up this session? Yes, Haley.
So y'all touched a little bit on the debt issue, with schooling and everything. Are there enough grants and scholarships available to students going into a 2-year degree? Just a little background, I earned 3 degrees, all debt-free, including an MBA, because I knew how to write scholarship letters and to, communicate well to the folks who are in charge of that, Coastal Carolina, and also Greenville Tech. So just curious if there is a network or program to help those students write scholarship letters.
I don't know if that's a field of expertise for anybody up here, but anybody have any insight on that?
I don't personally have any scholarship writing abilities. That's not in my wheelhouse, but I will say that the state has done an amazing job with federal and state monies, really sponsoring degrees in our technical programs and making those available for relatively low cost or free, especially since COVID. We've had a lot of monies directed in that direction.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
I would just say I'm certainly hopeful. Obviously, as we're not the legislature, but I certainly hope that all this analysis and data that we put out is going to help people have an awareness of what are the jobs that we most need, and hopefully figure out what are the incentive structures that can support people as they seek to enter the jobs that we're going to need most.
And I know Midlands Tech does have a great support system for that. Now, in terms of the dollar amount, in terms of accessibility and all of that, I don't know those statistics off the top of my head, but I think that's a great question, because it creates that pathway, for success to be able to do that. And I, talk to parents all the time, and there might be resources available, but they don't know how to connect to them. And I think that's a big part of the challenge. Exactly.
So in my experience, to piggyback on that, there's workforce initiative money, there's VA money, there's VOC rehab support, there are personal grants and scholarships, and then there's federal and state funding. So there are opportunities. It is a bit of a if this, then that, and we've asked for some literal graphic depiction of that to help with the process. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say, I can't speak to the scholarship writing, but to echo the comments that you've already heard, there are lots of federal and state scholarship and grant dollars available currently. We've seen more in the last few years than I've ever seen. And in addition to that, Apprenticeship Carolina leverages grant dollars from the U.S. Department of Labor as well. So if the program that they're pursuing is part of a registered apprenticeship program, there's even additional dollars on top of that. So
that's good to know as well. And just on the, as we talked about the marketing communication aspect of things, from my perspective, you made me think about stories that we've covered. For example, in Richland District 1, there was a story about some students who went through an apprentice program to become barbers. And there was a whole award ceremony, and we interviewed one young man who wants to open his own barbershop. Like, he has a whole business plan, laid out to be able to do that. And the key to getting that story on was them sending us, not just the statistics about this program, but somebody who can share their story, putting a face to these stories. Because, when a parent sees one kid on TV being highlighted, for wanting to open his own barbershop, then another parent may be more willing to consider, that program. And so when we get news releases, with stats and numbers, that stuff might not always make TV, or it won't make TV in as compelling a way as a story will, with a person's face. And so success stories of, the kids being hired after competing the programs, or, people, landing whatever job and starting whatever apprentice program. To see those success stories, I think success breeds success is essentially what it is. And to be able to highlight those stories and put a name and a face to them. Not everybody wants to get on TV and tell, whatever their story is, but for those who are willing to do that, I think that helps a lot. And so keep that in mind with any stories that you want to share, not just with us, but with any media outlets, to be able to put a face to it, to be able to share a success story, to be able to share how they achieved whatever that is, to be able to highlight whatever the program is a very valuable strategy that, and television stations have so many platforms now with social media and everything. It might not be the lead story in the 6 o'clock news, but honestly, being on the website is almost an even better commodity, because that's global and it has such a further reach than the audience that's right here immediately in South Carolina. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of telling stories as well. Well, you all have been terrific with your questions and engagement. We certainly appreciate it. Let's give all of our panelists a big round of applause. And I do believe materials have been handed out to contact, but I just want to make sure that everybody has that information. So will we go through, starting with you, Amanda, the best way to follow up with you if people have questions about what you've shared today?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach me by email, which is richardsonam. I'll give you a minute to write. At sctech, TECH, system, SYSTEM.edu. Or you can call my cell, and that's 803-542-0857. And likely what I would do is get you connected with your local apprenticeship consultant.
Wonderful, thank you. Bryan.
Look forward to talking with you.
Sure. So first off, I would encourage everybody to go to the Department of Employment and Workforce website, which is dew.sc.gov, to learn more about what all we've got going on to help the business community. The website for our LMI operations is scworkforceinfo.com. I will admit it's not the best website. We're in the process of improving it and making it a little more user-friendly, but that's out there. As I mentioned earlier, LMI customer service at dew.sc.gov is how you get in touch with everybody on my team. If you're looking for me personally, that's B as in boy, Grady, Grady, at dew.sc.gov. And we would love to hear from anybody who's interested.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Taryn.
All right, everybody ready? It's T as in Tom, ARY, N as in Nancy, at sctrucking.org. Our Be Pro, Be Proud website is beproudsc.org. And my cell phone number, which voicemails are no good, so send a text, 803-315-8540. Hope to hear from you.
Well, thank you each for your expertise and insight and your time sharing that with us today. Thank you all for your engagement and your questions. I encourage you to, these forums and panels are always just kind of the starting point, but it's what we take from these discussions and how we move forward with engagement that really makes a difference. So whatever you've heard today that you think can be of assistance to you or that you can build on, I certainly encourage you to follow up with our great experts here to help make sure South Carolina is all that it can be. We're going to take a brief break. We'll resume at about 10:30, so we'll see you then. Thank you so much.